Welcome to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David.
My name is Matt.
And we are the Taylor Bros.
Indeed, we are. Well, today we are diving into a wonderful topic, death. Remember, you will die. Memento Mori.
Yes. This links a little bit to the last one, I think. We talked about Ryan Holiday last episode, and one of the things he's got quite into is the Stoic philosophy. I think we briefly touched on that. And this idea of memento mori, that's quite big in some Stoic understandings. This idea, remember you will die, or you must die.
Yes. I believe it's Latin, memento mori. And yes, it's often translated, remember you will die. The article that I read that prompted this episode, I thought, oh yeah, it's a really good take on it. They actually say, we reckon a more accurate translation is remember you must die. And they said although it's a subtle difference, it does change the way that you understand it. But before we dive into that, why do we need to remember we've got to die? Why do we want to do that? That's pretty morbid. Beginning of the new year, Happy New Year. Remember you're going to die. So, now we're in February. It's the month of love and death. I've just coined that. You can drop it. I think let's drop that. When I first sent this to you, David, what were your thoughts on this topic, on this article?
I suppose I've come across this idea in a number of different ways, maybe more recent ways of understanding this. I've written my own obituary. That's a way of remembering I will die or I must die.
Yeah.
I read a book called 4,000 Weeks, which is about how long most of us, our life expectancy is. We're going to get 4,000 weeks. And it's that idea of, that's not that much, especially considering I'm already 17, 1,800 weeks into that, so in a week doesn't feel very long, but it's like, well, when I start ticking them off of 4,000, it does. And it's just a reminder that it's like, actually, I think it can be a useful thing for most of us because, and they talk about this bit in the article, mostly we avoid thinking about it. We don't engage with the fact that we're going to die. We live as if we're going to live forever, but also we live really short term. So somehow we're quite risk averse, but also, yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? We're not, if we know we're going to die, you'd maybe think, hey, we maybe take a few more big risks with big payoffs. But instead, we think we're going to live forever, so we don't take any risks, and we just sort of live very present, and that can have costs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The article goes to explain, it says that the origins of this, whilst aren't certain, definitely go back to at least as far as Roman times. And one of the uses was when there was maybe a general returning victorious from battle, as they were riding through that parade, as they were being paraded through the city victorious, there was either a servant or a slave sitting in the chariot next to him or standing in the chariot next to him and whispering this other sentence, which I'm not going to try and say because it's longer Latin, but effectively the translation is, look behind, remember you also are a man. And it's that thing of, remember you're immortal. You might feel in this moment immortal, but you are a mortal. And again, that's exactly what this phrase, the smaller one, memento mori, is. It's remember you will die. And in doing that changes the way that you're going to live, because I'm not going to live forever. I'm not this eternal being. And even though, as we've commented before, our culture at the moment seems to worship youth. All of the celebrated people that you see up on the screen are young and beautiful and in the peak of their health. We love to celebrate that. And there's constantly a new stream. And once you've fallen off the other end of it, you're kind of, you've got to try and find something else to get your glory from. But yeah, we live these short term, we glorify youth, and we think, oh, that's never going to happen to me, or it won't happen to me. So the active movement towards, actually, I will die, or again, as this phrase is, I must die. Well, how is that going to change the way I live? Because if I must die, I'd want to die well. And if I must die well, that probably means I'm going to have to have lived well.
Yeah, and that's how he sort of finishes. You must live well. I think that was interesting. Imagine we all peak moment, and you're like, you've just had this huge victory, you're celebrated by everyone, and there's a person just sort of whispering to you, it's like, you're just a mortal like me, and
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you're not that
Yeah.
great, you're gonna die as well. I mean, I get the idea, which is good to be humble, but I'm not sure it's that great when someone else is like, you should be humble.
It's interesting. I wonder how many of those people that that had that role end up getting stabbed and thrown off of the chariot.
Well, you said they were a slave, so there is a sort of a risk there, isn't there? But yeah, that's interesting. But the broader idea I do quite think is helpful. That I think he finishes this in the last paragraph. It's like, yeah, remember you must die, but ultimately remember you must live and
Mm,
live well, and with aliveness and fullness. And actually, you will die. I will die, and everyone dies. It's we joke about it. The two certainties in life are tax and death, um, and it's like, but actually, do we really face that? Do we contemplate that? And people wiser and smarter than me have talked about that moment when you truly grasp that you are finite, that you will die. It changes you at quite a fundamental and deep level, and it changes the way you live and you approach life. Um,
yeah.
some people never get that. Maybe some people get that early. Lots of people probably get that a little bit later after life and experiences happen to you.
Yeah. It's interesting because, of course, this phrase and this philosophy goes back a couple of thousand years at least. And I'm sure it went further because back then people were not so separated away from death. It wasn't so easy to sort of medicalize it, and it's become professionalized. Yet some of the people that hooked into this were, he talked about Trappist monks in the 17th century. I remember actually listening to Pete Scazzero. He went and I think lived in a monastery for maybe a decade or so, and talks about kind of there was a grave plot that they were digging every day. They did a little bit of digging, and it was like, oh, that's whoever dies next, that's their grave, and then we'll start digging the next one. And it seems mad, doesn't it? It seems mad to be like, oh yeah, we're digging, it's probably going to be George, or whatever. But like, it seems mad because like that is super macabre. Is it macabre or macabre? I don't know. Macabre and gloomy. And yet, I'm sure that in doing that, it kind of that recognition of the brevity of life, it brings a sense of clarity. This is not a day to be wasted. This is not a day to just be thrown away. It is a day or a week, the 4,000 weeks, to be seized, and not necessarily to be squeezed out of and sort of to what's it called, seize the day, but it's that actually I want to enjoy the richness now. And what does it look like to build a day that is moving towards I will not be here? Apparently in the catacombs, there were these probably under Rome, I'm guessing. The catacombs, there were these statements that was one was like, where you stand, we once stood, and where we are now, you will one day be. That's like,
And like you said, it's that clarifying moment of helping you recognize what's important. And it's not nihilistic in the sense that it's like, oh, I'm going to die, so why do anything? It's much more like, I'm going to die, so let's make the moment of it, make the most of this. Let's seek beauty in the world. Let's create joy. Let's live purposefully, according to really what is important for you. And most people find actually that's pretty similar. That's relationships, that's people, that's purpose, and so those sorts of things can be quite really interesting and helpful. And so I wonder, as we're talking, it's like, have I really faced up to the fact that I will die? Talking to somebody and I'm like, well, we talked, my grandma was saying, it's like, I don't know how long I've got left. And I was sort of like, yeah, well, I don't know how long I've got left,
yeah.
like reality. But she's like, yeah, but you probably will. And it's like, well, maybe I probably will, but you don't know. And it's like, am I living in such a way that if I were to die or something bad was happening in the next month, week, year, whatever, what would I have left? Have I lived in a way that is joyful and seeking beauty? I don't know.
And of course, we've mentioned a couple of times the last paragraph, the closing paragraph in this article, and I think where we want to land is Now, what Memento Mori really invites us to do is remember we must die, and yet remember we must live. That's what it really means. It means memento vivere.
Mm-hmm.